Hello, everyone. Welcome to our day 2 of programming here at the Lively Grid Daily House. I am so excited to be here with you again today. Kicking off our day-to-day, we are having a conversation about the future of creative, and I have an incredible lineup of panelists. So I'm going to try to talk as little as possible and learn so much from these great panelists that are beside me. I am joined by Clayton Ruebensaal, who is the Chief Creative Officer for Comcast, as well as Shannon Reed, who is the Vice President of Accounts and Operations at the global influencer agency, The Fifth. And finally, I'm joined by Tarah Malhotra-Feinberg, who is the Senior Vice President of Wayfarer Studios and Executive Producer of Man Enough Podcast. And just to set some context for this conversation today, when I was thinking about themes for this discussion, I had just read the book Filter World by Kyle Shaka. And in that book, his thesis is that because consumers are receiving content and creative through algorithms, we have really resulted in sort of a flattening of our culture and a homogenization of taste. And so as creatives, I'm thinking deeply about how do we break through that homogenization to serve not only our brand partners, but also the consumers that are on the other side of that creative content. How do we really deliver value for them? So to start this conversation, I'd love to hear from our panelists just something creatively that is challenging them right now, that they're focused on or that is keeping them up at night. And I will start with you, Clayton.
Okay. I love that starting place. I haven't read the book, but that idea that technology is homogenizing what customers are experiencing. I remember this social post that came out probably 2 years ago within all my designer friends of all the luxury logos and how they had gone from these very special things to looking almost identical, all sans serif fonts. And it really stuck with me. And, when I look at what I'm thinking about right now, it's just the huge premium on differentiation, because it's easy to look at part of my business, let's say like selling the internet. That'd be something where like internet service is something that everybody needs. But when you look at how it's sold, there's always a price point. It's always about how fast it is. And, I admire my competitors, but when you look at all of it, it all looks kind of the same. So how do you really differentiate in a category, I think, is more important than ever. And I think the exciting part, Tina, is it'll create new opportunities. Like the more that a technology makes everything the same, I think the more value there will be to somebody who is just simply brave enough to do something different.
Yeah, I want to come back to that idea of differentiation, especially as we introduce AI. Shannon, what's something that you're thinking about right now?
I think that really for me resonates around just specifically the algorithm flattening itself out and us seeing like trends, right? We work in social a lot and everything is trending and every brand wants to be a trend, right? But then it's just kind of tack on, add on. And so I think for me, the thing that creatively we are constantly talking to our partners about is bravery, right? It's about trying something new and knowing that like sometimes it's going to land and it's going to work and it's going to work really, really well. And sometimes it's not. And that's okay, right? Because it's the internet, we can delete it. It's social media, it can go away, right? And I think there's a little bit of that bravery that we want to make sure we constantly are pushing on, because that's when you get to real breakthrough work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Tara?
Yeah, so we're working in film, we're working in TV, we're working in digital media, and I don't think it's platform specific. I think that we're seeing this happen everywhere. I mean, in film, it's a race to scale. You're seeing everything needs to be a franchise or a superhero movie. And in digital, you're constantly chasing the trends. It's how do I tap into the thing that everyone is talking about? Yet trends come from doing something different. And so I think it really comes down to how do I find a purpose that drives me so that I am consistent, because people respond to authenticity, people respond to unique points of view. And I also think that brands especially, but in general, anyone looking at this space, sometimes looks at scale a little bit too much. We put too much emphasis on scale because there's so much value in deep engagement. If you reach people that really care about that story or that piece of content or that topic that you're talking about, they're going to amplify it. They're going to engage with it more deeply, and ultimately that can drive conversion or whatever those follow-on metrics that you want are.
Sorry, Tina, can I build on that? Just because I think that's brings us to another point, which is, that overvaluing of scale. We can sit in a marketing meeting and talk about the billions of impressions that this piece of content we made had, and you think like, well, I don't remember hearing anybody talk about it. Like, how did 1 billion people see this? And we were talking about earlier, Tina and I, the stat that as American consumers or global consumers, we're seeing 5,000 marketing messages a day. And if we're being sincere at the end of our day, if we had a little piece of paper and a pen and said, all right, write them down. What'd you see? It'd be a great day for our industry if you had one thing on that list. 2 would be out of this world. So I think to your point, Tarah, like the valuing of actually getting above the fold, as it were, actually breaking through, that's miles away from, maybe you were on the same page while I was on that page, but I didn't see you.
That's such a good point, and it brings me to something else we were talking about. As creatives, when we are delivering messages to consumers, how do we make sure that we are honoring what they are providing for us, which is their time and attention, which is really the biggest asset that we all have? And when there's so much content coming at consumers, how as creatives do you think about making sure that that time consumers are giving us is well spent? And this is for anyone on the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we work with influencers a lot. And I think there's a level of authenticity there that you get if you give them the freedom to be themselves and do it their way. You're going to get a better message, you're going to get a better mix, and you're going to get a more authentic moment of connection with a consumer. But I do also think it is about really making sure that you're thinking a little bit differently, right? I think some of the breakthrough stuff this year or in the last year was like Barbie, and it was a pink house, right? And it was interesting because it was different, right? It wasn't like, oh, here's a trailer ad and here's a billboard of Barbie, on the Sunset Strip, right? So they broke through in the ways they went to market, and they did it in a different way. And I think creatively, the more we can give ourselves that flexibility to try different things, is the better we can kind of be placed in breaking through and honoring that consumer and having fun with what they care about.
Yeah, to build on that, so we've, on the Man Enough side, which is a content studio that sits at the intersection of social impact and pop culture, really focused on positive masculinity and gender equality. We've built an organic community of about 1 million followers and subscribers, which is great. That's a nice big number. What's really driving us there is that any time we're going to create some content, we have to put it through the filter of, does this serve them? Great that we think this is a great idea, or something that we want to produce, but does it serve our audience? And the reason that we have been able to drive growth on YouTube and podcast and TikTok and Instagram and traditional platforms is because we put everything through that filter. And I'm a lot more excited about the hundreds of comments and the essays that people write on YouTube next to our videos than I am about, millions of views, right? I mean, those views are great and they help, bring sponsors on, but those comments are validation. It's people saying, thank you, this is what I was looking for. I've never heard it like this before. This is exactly what we were asking for last week, and it becomes a two-way conversation.
One of the themes that I've heard now all three of you touched on is this idea of marketers in general, creatives in general, are now kind of chasing that algorithm, and it's become a game to try to figure out to understand how they're manufactured and to gamify our content. So how do we break out of that? Where are you finding your inspiration to actually drive culture forward versus respond to what's already happening yesterday? I'll start with you, Clayton.
Yeah, sure. I guess my perspective is, coming right off a job that was very heavily performance-minded to a job that is more creatively focused. I do think it's not an either or, and I don't mean that to be a cop-out at all. I really do think that the mistake I see is when people are, praying at the altar of one of the other, of like, it's all about data and like, it just, you got to put it into customers' hands, or the other side, it's really about the art of marketing. And I don't think either is totally true. I think there's just a logic that crosses everything you're doing. And when I look at what's working best, just from, the facts of the matter after we've done something, it's always when we've had a large dollop of common sense of what we're doing. We're taking advantage of data, but to Shannon's point, we're having the bravery to do something interesting and different. What I would say I see let's start with the data side, is the early days are fantastic just in like making the wheel turn faster. Like we're making a lot more content, working with Adobe, with Firefly, we're making beautiful things quickly at scale, low cost. It's amazing. But what I'm most excited about is how many things was I just putting in the drawer as I can't dare to even think about that before, that now I can. The biggest example that came up this week, I was talking to a gentleman about our multicultural advertising efforts. And every job I've had, I've felt incredibly dissatisfied. It's like, well, we have enough money to do this audience, and we're out of money. It's like, well, what about this audience, this audience, this audience, And, it's great that we could do something really productive with Latinx or, maybe Asian Americans. But what about all the other things we know we can and should do? And I think AI is going to open that up. And, my hope would be to be sitting here in a year and say, we did it. We're doing Vietnamese American marketing. We're doing Polish American marketing. And those would be things that previously I just would have said, we shouldn't even waste 5 minutes having that discussion because we'll never be able to accomplish it. And now I think we'll be able to. And that's really exciting.
Shannon, how are you thinking about this?
I mean, I think for me, I talk to the young people on my team. Those are the people I'm most inspired by. They're brave and they want to try things out and they want to do different things. They're ahead of where we are because they live it and breathe it and they know it every day, and it's the first thing they see when they wake up and the last thing they see when they go to sleep. And so I think for me, really spending that time with those people and really being like, all right, what would you do if this was your brief, if this was your brand, if this was your thing, and then letting them try has been an absolute blast. And it's really fun, and sometimes it's really weird, but it's an absolute joy, and we have the best time laughing about it in the office, and it just makes me the happiest.
And go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, you can't ignore it. I mean, you can't ignore the algorithm. If you're creating or publishing on an algorithm-driven platform, like, you're just stupid if you ignore the algorithm. I mean, that's how it works, right? That's what drives visibility, and there's no point in doing it if no one's going to see it, right? To me, I think that is input that you take in that informs some guidelines around format, guidelines around the creativity. Oh, okay, let's use the in-platform creator tools. Let's do graphics like this and not like this. Let's make it this length, not that length, right? And you can still be creative, you can still tell your story, but don't ignore the algorithm. Like, you got to pay attention to what's working and push outside that a little bit, because then you'll change the algorithm if you do it right and it gets picked up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing that I would say. There still needs to be something above that, right? Because the algorithm, you're right, like it's the tool of the job. Like you have to use the tool, but a hammer or a shovel, like, it's just a tool. Like, what do you want to build? What are you trying to say? What's the bigger story? And I look at I find especially luxury brands to be very adept and skilled in the digital social space. And I think what they do better than most brands is they know what they want to say. They know who they are. And so when you apply that to the tools, I think that's where you really get to some magical places, versus just like, I think you can kind of get blinded by the tools and just be like, well, it's just the algorithm. It's like, no. You need something. What are you trying to do with it? What are you trying to say with it? Who are you?
Speaking of tools, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how generative AI is going to change the shape of creative. And I'm curious about how you're all thinking about utilizing AI. You've already given some examples, Clayton, but with your respective brands, Tarah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We're embracing it. I got the OpenAI, the ChatGPT Teams account for my whole team. So we're all on there, and I created a GPT. I trained it with the 100 transcripts of the episodes of our show, for example. I uploaded all those transcripts, and now my team can go on there and say, I want to make a 60-second Instagram video about fatherhood. Make me a paper cut, and it'll choose 5 quotes from different episodes, and like it does all that busy work, right? And they're able to kind of get there. It's not taking away their creativity. No, it's doing what like the intern who's not on that day would do, and a lot faster and better. It's helping us like, draft, like description copy or make things more search optimized, and like it allows us to mine our IP in a way that drives our creativity and allows our amazing minds to use it that way. Also, tools like Perplexity are just blowing my mind because finally there's a way to use natural language to search and get verified results. It's linking out to actual data sources and reports and studies that in natural language help to contextualize what you're looking for market research or cultural studies or things like that. So I'm really excited about what's happening here. Yes, it's scary and some people's jobs will change, but when the automobiles came out, like it's not like horses went extinct, like it's a painful transition, but we will get through it and it will be okay, and creative, smart people will figure out how they fit into that ecosystem.
What I hadn't thought of with your Perplexity example is both with them and Adobe, they're also solving some problems that were sitting there of authenticity of content or reliability of content, or in Adobe's case, like how they've approached generative AI with Firefly, where they're making sure that the legal rights are there. They're making sure that copyright infringement isn't happening. They're making sure that as they build this thing out from the ground up, it's not making the mistakes of the past. So, maybe it's another moment where we can get some things right in the future that maybe we didn't have right in the last chapter.
Yeah, it's moving so fast. They're taking out hallucination, in just giving you an answer that doesn't have verified results, and they're respecting IP. It's a great point.
I think for us, we use it in kind of 2 different ways. I would say one in like creativity as like proof of concept. It's a really quick way for a team to iterate and explain an idea that might be a little bit scary or new, right? Hey, here's an image that looks sort of like what we intend. So again, it's helping those marketers get more comfortable, more confident, be a little bit more brave, right? And then I think on the other side, which is the side I'm probably most excited about, is really the insights part, right? Social listening is a lot of work and be really manual, really doing that sort of real work. And, Gen Z uses TikTok for search. They don't use Google. Like, brands gotta have to think about that. What are those terms? How do we look at that? How do we ingest all that content and look at what content is actually the best and driving the best search results for people? And that's manual work, right? And that used to take a lot of time. So we're using that, and we're using AI to kind of look at content and figure out what's really working, what's resonating, and then using that as a model to kind of create creative strategies and everything else against it.
Shannon, I think that's a really good point. The discovery has changed so much in terms of creative content. And TikTok certainly is a place where a lot of consumers are discovering Instagram. And I'm thinking, too, about how generative AI is going to change discovery as people are searching for content in platforms like Google. If the result of that search just spits out a query result or one answer, and it's not driving traffic to a particular publisher or to a particular brand, that changes discovery as well. And I think that potentially pushes people into more social avenues for telling creative stories. So I wonder how you're all thinking about this issue of discovery and how it's going to change.
I think we see it already, a little bit. I just think the reality is it's moved away from the world of Google and it's moved into the world of TikTok and Instagram. Like in my house, we call Instagram the shopping app. I mostly use it to shop, right? Like, and see my friends' stuff occasionally, but really that's what it is. It's a really great algorithm at serving me things I want to purchase. And Meta's done a great job. So I think we're already seeing this happen. I think we just maybe aren't talking about it enough. I do think the reality of like a single source outcome and what ChatGPT or the equivalents might do, and what that means for the search business in general, I think is going to be really interesting. And I'm not sure what that means yet. I think I haven't seen like this is what's going to happen to search.
What are you seeing about discovery in terms of how you are getting audience for your projects?
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I don't know that there's going to be one winner takes all in this current situation. I think it's all about being platform native. I think that, like, for example, when we first launched our podcast, like everyone would do, we were releasing clips on social saying, yeah, and hear the full conversation over there. They were promos, basically, and it was not doing very well. As soon as we started saying, what's the TikTok version of this show, it exploded, and now we have like hundreds of thousands of followers and deep engagement because it's made for that community. And even more to that point, I think if you think about what is the extension of these creative projects or other content pieces. So our founder, Justin Baldoni, his next film is It Ends With Us, based on the Colleen Hoover bestseller. And Book Talk on TikTok, TOK, is a huge community where people are very passionate about books. There's a massive community around that book specifically, which has been like at the top of the bestseller list year after year, multiple times. And so as we were announcing this film, we thought about how do we tap into that passionate community, and thought about content on TikTok specifically around the core IP that we had optioned to make this film. And it wasn't about the film. Like, we didn't have stills from production, It was about, hey, we're bringing this to life. What do you think? We even cast a character through that community from TikTok, a minor character, to get them involved, make them feel like they had some buy-in to this, So to me, it's really about being platform specific within those existing communities.
Shannon, that reminds me of the social out paradigm that the Fifth is pushing right now. Do you want to speak a little to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, I think as we see brands moving forward, right, social is the beginning, right? It's often the discovery moment, but it's often the end moment where I click to purchase, right? And so as a brand, we need to be thinking about how are we social out? So everything needs to start with social, start in insight, start in community, start in behavior, start in things they care about, whether that's memes or kind of these search terms, and then pushing that out into your wider marketing campaign so that you can circle it all back to social, where that conversation of those comments happens and that deeper engagement happens. And that's where you really drive conversion and brand love and that loyalty that you really want to have. And so all those things need to tie together to drive that forward.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you said, Tarah, because I've had similar experience of trying an idea that we believed would work for many reasons in a place in the digital world, and it didn't, right? It just didn't. And then moving that same idea to another space and having it blow up. That happened twice. And I think it reinforces that, the tools aren't homogenous. TikTok isn't Instagram, isn't Facebook, isn't whatever will come out next. And so it isn't just, like we put it on a PowerPoint slide as like, well, this is social or this is digital. I love what you said about Instagram becoming shopping, because I don't think most people would have seen that coming at the beginning. At the beginning, it was, here's the beautiful version of social media. But it very quickly became this very elegant shopping experience and very accurate one. And it was spooky because it's like, wait, have you bought something on? Yeah, I have too. And like, yeah, my shoes. And like, it just reinforces how deeply you have to understand that these are different tools for different jobs, and that they evolve. But it's really exciting.
Yeah, that makes me think a lot about the Super Bowl, what we saw with the Super Bowl creative this year, which was that there was a lot of content in those 30-second spaces that revolved around stories that were told on social media, or how to embed or continue a story that was already happening elsewhere with an audience. And so I'm thinking a lot, too, about how do we create story universes and utilize platforms in ways that play off of each other to keep people engaged where they're at in a particular moment. Are you thinking about how to keep stories going on different platforms, and what are some of the strategies that you're using for that, Clayton?
Yeah, it's funny because you and I have not talked about this, but this was a very unusual Super Bowl for me, this past one. Because I had just gotten to my new job, I had just started working with my team, and we were deciding, should we do the Super Bowl or not? And at the end of the day, we said, well, we don't have any really big news that's worthy of investing in, so no. And then a couple weeks passed, and we said, well, but we do want to take advantage of those eyeballs. So we ended up, to your point, really segmenting into two kind of miniature campaigns, one for our customers, really to drive engagement, loyalty, ultimately cross-sell, and one for prospects, which was more about bringing people into the franchise. And it was really fun because we spent about 25% of what we would have spent on the Super Bowl. And when we looked back at how those seemingly smaller things worked, it was almost identical to the net of what we would have projected to have gotten from the bigger Super Bowl effort of, had we done, a traditional Super Bowl commercial, which we've done in the past and I'm sure do in the future again. Had we done all the pre-social work, had we done all the post work, it ended up in a really similar place. And that was probably the thing that surprised us most. Not that they worked, but that by creating almost two micro campaigns, it did the same heavy lifting. It was interesting.
Yeah,
unexpected.
That is interesting. I mean, content formats and delivery are changing so much in terms of storytelling. Shannon, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where TikTok is about like being real, and Instagram is about that beautiful world, right? And I think a lot of people just think that cross-posting it'll work, but it's like the stuff that ends up going viral for us is always this like gritty, kind of realer, more fun, feels of the platform stuff. And I think in thinking about like a Super Bowl campaign, how are you doing that? Like where are those touch points, and how are you pulling out those assets to give yourself that efficiency to scale it across all those platforms? Because I think they all are different, and Shorts is now coming up. We're seeing a lot of success there, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see like now what's Threads next, like what's going to start really resonating on Threads, and what does that look like, and how do you start to like really look at a mix across all those platforms?
Tara, did you have a thought?
Yeah, for us, we really come at it from a social impact standpoint. What can we do that uplifts humanity around some of the stories we're telling? So the It Ends With Us project I mentioned, it has some serious themes of domestic violence and overcoming childhood trauma. And we made a year-long partnership with this incredible global nonprofit called No More. And the film doesn't come out until June. And so we have already started. We had the founders on our podcast. We just last week was No More Week. It's a week of activism. So they have a virtual 5K, and we got a bunch of influencers to create original content around these themes about digital stalking and different themes that could be harmful. And some of our past guests came on and created videos, and we will continue to do that throughout the spring. And then when the movie comes out and we're in the marketing window, we will be deeply involved in that community. It's not tokenizing. It's not like, okay, check that box, we stand for this. No, we actually stand for this. We really care about this. We've been supporting this community. We've been providing resources. We've been providing thought leadership around this. And so that leads into this film being more than just entertainment. It's actually something that drives positive social impact. So we're looking at that across our projects, how we can do that across platforms.
Clayton, did you have another thought on this one?
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing as a marketer, when we think about back to what Shannon was saying about getting each of those pieces right, being native to TikTok or doing the right thing that might actually spread on Instagram or X, it's adding them up. As a person running a marketing group, I need the compound interest. Like, I can't just have okay, this thing worked really well. Yeah, of course I do. That's table stakes. But, I'm looking at how all of that adds up over days, weeks, months, years to really build brand equity, so that every time I start, I'm not starting the conversation anew, but I'm adding up. And you look at the great brands out there, I think they do that really, really well. I look at how Target does that from a visual identity perspective, where everything adds up. And, they work with so many brand partners. They work across so many channels. They have so many agencies, but they really deliver on the core of who they are through everything. And I think when we talk about the complexity of, are you doing everything you can in each channel properly? Are you really understanding them? Are you working with influencers? I think the thing that's getting lost in that is it all adding up? Because that's what the business needs.
I really love the idea of compound interest across different efforts creatively, and I think that that's a really good use case for generative AI, because being able to provide all of this data into a data set that is, and a large language model that's able to make sense of it for us, that's a really exciting prospect. I'm conscious of time, and maybe our audience has a couple of questions, so if anyone has a question from the audience, please feel free. Okay, then I will turn it back to our panelists to leave
Very
our...
elegant, Tina. I like that. I was going to start calling on the audience, so your way is probably better. Eric, you were first, so.
Awesome. So you mentioned Perplexity, Firefly. What other tools out there really excite you?
For people that are listening, what other tools are really exciting right now creatively? And this is for anyone on the panel.
I wouldn't say I have an answer. I would say I'm meeting with a lot of different companies right now who are inspiring in what they're trying to do and what they're starting. So I'd say what it looks like in my world, Eric, is a lot of small experiments with different very talented companies from around the world who are doing different things in the AI space. So, Shannon talked about discovery. We're having a meeting next week with a company that thinks they've reinvented the wheel on how we can gather customer insights globally, nationally, whatever you want, but in days, not months, the way we used to, at just a higher quality rate. Like, that's really interesting to me. We're talking to other smaller firms out of the UK about what they can do in the production user flow. So I'd say that's where we are right now. And then there's other ones like Perplexity or Adobe who are at scale where we're really starting to actually use it in our day-to-day work.
Mike.
Sorry, you talked earlier about the whole NFL experience you had.
Yeah.
And it follows some of the talks we were having yesterday. Given there are so many unique ways now to deliver more direct engagement to audiences, we started talking about the funnel, and it almost felt like that because budgets are getting more scrutinized, let's say,
Well
the
said.
funnel is almost starting to drop now. Because do you need all of that big awareness and big expense, like you said, doing a big ad in the NFL to get the eyeballs, when actually if you target your audience a lot more specifically, you just said you almost probably got the same ROI for less money. So do you think there's a shift in this kind of landscape of advertising and marketing?
I don't. And the reason I don't, and I think I think there's one big data point that I've seen across, this is now my fourth industry,
Right.
and one data point that gets missed all the time in that view of the funnel is how many customers have decided before they've gotten into the funnel. And it's always a big, big stat, whether it's the hotel business, financial services, or now in media and telecommunications. It's a huge number. In all three of those categories, I don't know one that's under 59%. So if you took that as like the low place, that, just say like agnostically across categories, over half the people have already decided. They're not shopping. They're not learning. They're not. For the ones who are, I agree with you.
Right.
It's lower down. Like we can, and there's also like great, very big companies who do a really good job of that, of winning customers as they're in the process. The danger and the risk is how many aren't even playing the game because they grew up saying, I'm going to buy this car. I know I'm going to get that watch. Or the next time I'm in the market for, sneakers, I know I'm going to get those. Like, I'm not shopping. I've already shopped before the game's begun.
I mean, I totally agree with that because I think it's also about where is your company on the life cycle, right? Because I think there's a lot of I've been in the advertising industry for 15 years. I've seen a lot of those big brands that have 92% brand awareness, but like very low conversion, right? Because no one knows who they are or cares about who they are or wants to even engage with them. And the way to fix that is awareness. You need to tell me who you are and what you care about. And so awareness media is always going to exist. It's always going to be a thing. I think for me, it's about where are you as your brand in the life cycle? Where are you with your customers? Are they changing, right? Like, is Gen Z not aware of you because you're an old brand and you don't show up anywhere they see you, right? Like, I don't know. Like, there's a
Stop
lot
looking at me as you say old. No. I'll say one other kind of funny thing on that. We were out in Silicon Valley meeting with companies. We do it every year, like with our ventures group. And I would always get paired with their head of marketing. And we would chit chat about, our companies working together. But invariably, we would share, insights. And what was fascinating, because I have come from very traditional brands, is traditional East Coast brands are obsessed with the algorithm, are obsessed with performance marketing, are obsessed with digital. Like almost to the point where like it's sacrilege to bring anything up. The opposite was true in Silicon Valley. When I meet with Silicon Valley companies, they want to talk about outdoor billboards. They want to talk about TV ads. Because I think it's what Shannon was saying. They need to tell the story of who they are for the first time. So, but it's very interesting. How much like the corporate psychology plays into like the marketing and business decisions we're making.
Sorry, to Shannon's point very quickly, do you think that experiential will come into play because there is no story that the brands don't know or people don't know the brand? Do you reckon that experiential should be focused upon a little bit more? Because whatever we've talked about so far, there has been nothing about experiential whatsoever, and totally appreciate that's not the point here anyway, but
I do. I think experiential gives you that deeper touch point moment, right? It really allows you to invest in a consumer, in a moment, in an experience, right? And I think even if you think about doing it we do a bunch of experiential with influencers where we push them through the space. You should see how jacked they get. They are so happy to be there. They are so excited. They have 20 million followers on TikTok. And it's like, this is just a little pop-up thing. But they're not filming alone at home. Talking to the phone, being like, I don't know, is it good? Like, and so they're so excited. Like, they'll come up and show me their videos while they're filming them. I'm like, you know what you do. Like, you have 20 million followers on TikTok. I'm great. If you're great, I'm fantastic. But I do think there's a level of experiential gives you that deeper play, that deeper engagement. I think the hard thing for brands is that it's kind of expensive and like it's a little bit hard to scale. Like which is why I feel like you always end up with like the bus tour, right? It's
right,
always
that's
like
the cheapest way to do it, the bus tour. But I'm embarrassed that we didn't bring it up, to be honest, because while that isn't the topic, we are at South by Southwest, and this is the Super Bowl World Cup and Olympics of experiential. The things that you can see and experience here are mind-blowing. It's one of the reasons I love coming. But even when I look at like the retail stores we have 600 stores in the US market, and it is the most effective thing we have. I love it because we could take a customer who comes in the door who knows nothing about, they're a customer of product A, they know nothing about product B. They can walk out of the store with product B. They can meet us, talk to us, see us, learn about us. That 3D environment does it all, whether it's a store or a music concert or a brand activation. It's an incredibly deep and memorable experience.
It's the easiest way to convert. That's the way I would imagine.
Yeah.
We're at time, but I want to leave the audience with something inspirational. So I want to give our panelists an opportunity to just say, what's a piece of creative that has recently inspired you?
Yeah. Tarah, let's hear from you first.
Maybe something that you read. Mine was Filter World. I was inspired to think a little bit differently from Kyle Shaka's book.
You're just gonna put it on me, huh?
I was in the CMO forum like a month ago, and this question was asked, and there was the between senior director to VP, CMOs, there was 50 people in that room. Everybody struggled. 10 years ago, that was not true. You would just say. And I think that this is really, really fascinating. I know, like, obviously you feel put on the spot. I would feel put on the spot. They'd asked me that question yesterday. But isn't this really interesting?
I appreciate that. Yeah. No, that's actually helpful because my brain immediately went to like, what is that big Super Bowl spot that like inspired me? But that helps because I realize it's so many small things. I mean, it's, the video of, the football player crying because, he just like, got his 1,000th pass or whatever, right? Like it's those little things. Yeah, I mean, honestly, my team inspires me because every Friday they curate a carousel of positive masculinity moments from around the web, stuff we don't create. And every Friday, like, I cry, I laugh, I feel touched. So it's those little moments, really, honestly. It's like the underproduced, real, authentic moments that I see around.
Yeah, no, and I love that you said that because I think that is something that back to the very beginning of this panel of like, hey, the algorithm is the tool. The algorithm is the thing that we have to do. And it is great and it yields so much fruit. But like, what's the other side of that? What's getting lost in that? And that bigger, impactful, memorable thing about the brand is something that's getting lost. And actually why I was pausing was like, I don't want to talk about my own stuff. That seems creepy and weird. And so I have a kind of like half step that actually leans into what Tarah was saying. The thing I saw most recently, I was with our team in London, Sky, and they did something about cyberbullying women in gaming, which is brutal. I mean, the nasty things that people say because they are under the cloak of anonymity they're gross, they're mean, they're hurtful. And they did this amazing activation. It's kind of experiential to this gentleman's question, where they brought in professional male gamers into a white seamless room to play a game. And then unbeknownst to them in real life, there were people shouting these same things that actually had been said, direct quotes, but at them through the walls. And it was alarming and like gave you a horrible pit in your stomach hearing these things. And it's like, that's the experience that women gamers are having. And it makes you want to cry. It's horrible. And like, I think, you hear these words thrown around all the time, like authenticity. And it's like it's not authentic. Just because you say it's authentic, it's not authentic. Something like that is authentic, or what Tarah was talking about, that's authentic.
I think what inspires you is another way of saying what makes you feel something. Yeah.
Well said, Tina.
Yeah. I think for me, it's probably not marketing. It's probably like the first thing that popped into my mind is Miss Peaches. And I don't know, and like Risa Tisa. And I don't know if you know either of these. So Dave Portnoy, the head of Barstool Sports, adopted this pit bull from like a rescue in Georgia. And he just makes these videos of him following this dog around, talking to it in a baby voice. And it's just, but she's like gone viral and grown like the most followers of Barstool Sports, any of their social media platforms ever, by like 30x. So, and it's just like, and he's raising money for the rescue that she's from, right? I'm a dog person, so it like gets to my heart. But I think for me, it's like really funny to watch. And then there's all these negative comments about pit bulls, right? And then he goes out and he goes, this is not true, and here's some facts about it, right? And he's changing people's minds. And none of this is marketing. This is just like a guy who got a dog who really likes his dog, right? But like for me, it brings me joy every time one of those comes across my feed. And she destroyed his glasses yesterday morning, and he was like, it's fine. He was like, she's really cute. I don't care.
I don't know if this is apples to what you're saying, Shannon, but I think the other thing that if I'm being really honest about what's inspiring me, I think it's physical things like architecture, beautiful product design. I was at the San Jose hotel. A friend told me I had to see it, and I went and walked through that, and it's like this incredibly chic but relaxed little hotel. Like, physical things are really inspiring me right now, and I think it's the counter to just living in a digital world.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you so much to this wonderful panel, and thank you to our audience for the questions. And I will turn it over to our next panel.
Thank you, Tina.